As the Russia-Ukraine war enters its third year, the conflict has taken a dramatic and dangerous turn. For the first time, Russian forces have struck deep into western Ukraine, targeting a military airbase once thought to be beyond the reach of war. This bold escalation has triggered alarm bells across Europe, not just in Kyiv, but in Brussels and Washington as well. In response, NATO has called for a staggering 400% increase in air defense capabilities along its eastern borders. The message from both sides is clear. The war is no longer confined, it is evolving, expanding and inching ever closer to NATO territory. One, expanding the war, a clear escalation. The strike on western Ukraine, a strategic surprise. In early June 2025, Russia carried out a precision strike using cruise missiles and kamikaze drones on a key military airbase in western Ukraine, near the border with Poland. This area had previously been considered a safe zone, serving as a vital hub for receiving and distributing Western military aid. Targets destroyed included ammunition and weapons depots supplied by the US and Germany, drone maintenance and operation facilities, a logistics coordination center supporting frontline forces in the east. By striking deep into Ukraine's rear, Russia demonstrated a clear intent to disrupt supply chains and extend the war's reach. Breaking the psychological line of the war. Until now, Russian attacks were mostly concentrated in eastern and southern Ukraine, Donbass, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia. But with this strike, Russia has shattered both the geographic and psychological boundaries of the war. The message from Moscow is unmistakable. Nowhere in Ukraine is safe. Any location receiving NATO weapons is a legitimate target. The strategic intent behind the escalation. This westward expansion of the battlefield serves several purposes: disrupting NATO supply lines, slowing the flow of weapons and aid, psychologically pressuring both Ukraine and its Western allies, especially Poland, the key logistics hub, testing NATO's response, probing the alliance's real red lines in the region. Initial reactions from Ukraine and the West. Immediately following the missile strike on a Western military base, President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered an emergency address from Kyiv. This was not just an attack on Ukraine, it was a strike against Europe's entire defense system. Russia is showing it is ready to cross every line, and we must respond 4 times faster and more decisively. He called for faster delivery of air defense systems, especially from Germany, the US, and France. A localized no-fly zone over rear areas to protect logistics routes. NATO to bolster defensive presence in Poland and Romania, near the Ukrainian border. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg stated, "Any act that threatens NATO borders is being closely monitored. The alliance will not allow any member state to be threatened without consequence." However, NATO has not invoked Article 5 since the strike did not cross into alliance territory. A defensive air shield reinforcement package was approved, but no no-fly zone over Ukraine was implemented. NATO members remain divided. Eastern European nations urge bolder action, while Western powers remain cautious. United States, committed, but no troops on the ground. A White House National Security Council spokesperson said, "We condemn this escalation by Russia. President Biden has ordered expedited weapons shipments, but let me be clear, the U.S. will not send troops into Ukraine." Key points. Washington pledged to send additional Patriot systems and HIMARS. The U.S. offered to accelerate air defense training for Ukrainian operators at NATO bases in Germany. While committed to supporting Ukraine, the U.S. maintains a strict no direct involvement stance. European nations' responses vary by proximity. Poland declared a nationwide high alert, deploying radar and interceptors near the border. Germany pledged increased aid, but refused to send fighter jets. Hungary and Austria voiced concerns about wider conflict risks, calling for diplomacy. France and the UK expressed readiness to intensify economic sanctions if Russia crosses the next red line. Two, Moscow's message: no safe zones left. The Kremlin's argument, declaring legitimate targets. Following the missile strike on a military airbase near the Polish border, Russia's Ministry of Defense swiftly issued a statement declaring any military facility receiving, storing, or deploying NATO-supplied weapons is a legitimate target for the Russian armed forces. This marks a shift in Russia's military doctrine, no longer confining operations to the battlefield, but extending deep into Ukraine's strategic rear, regardless of proximity to NATO territory. Psychological warfare, a blow to national confidence. The phrase, "no safe zones left," is not just a military declaration. It's a powerful tool of psychological warfare. For Ukrainian civilians, the long-held belief that Western Ukraine was a safe zone is shattered. Fear spreads nationwide. For international humanitarian and logistics efforts, areas once used for aid and supply coordination are now vulnerable, threatening delivery efficiency. For Western nations, Russia sends a clear warning: reconsider the risks of continuing to supply Ukraine through border regions. An indirect warning to NATO: we dare strike at your doorstep. Although Russian strikes haven't violated NATO territory, the attack occurred just 20 to 30 kilometers from the Polish border, making it a strategic deterrent message. Russia wants to prove it is unafraid of targeting areas near NATO, even if it doesn't cross the red line. Yet, it's a test of NATO's resolve. If NATO responds weakly, it opens the door for more aggressive moves. Simultaneously, it pressures transit nations like Poland to rethink their logistical and political risks. Redefining the battlefield, erasing the frontline concept. Previously, Ukraine could concentrate air defense systems on the eastern and southern fronts. Now, the Kremlin's message forces Ukraine to spread its air defense resources thinly, trying to protect multiple regions. Accept that military bases, warehouses, and even civilian airports may be targeted. Fight a non-linear, full-spectrum war with no clear front, no predictable pattern. Three, NATO responds, calls for a 400% boost in air defense. Emergency meeting in Brussels, highest alert since the war began. Following Russia's strike on a military airbase near the Polish border, NATO immediately convened an emergency meeting in Brussels. Leaders agreed that such attacks close to NATO's frontiers have crossed the gray zone and demand a response that is swift, strong, and concentrated. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg declared, "No air defense system built for the wars of the past is enough today. We must have systems that counter the threats of now and of what's coming." The 400% air defense surge, a strategic shock. One of the most striking proposals was a 400% increase in air defense capabilities across NATO's eastern flank. Specific actions include deployment of additional Patriot, NASAMS, Iris-T systems, and advanced anti-drone radars. Expansion of multi-layered defense, short, medium, and long-range systems. Establishment of real-time data sharing and early warning networks. This marks NATO's most ambitious defensive expansion since the Cold War. NATO's objective? No ally left behind. Since its founding in 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, has centered its existence around collective defense. Its most fundamental principle is, an attack on one is an attack on all. Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. When NATO declares no ally left behind, it is not merely a slogan, it is a foundational pledge to every member state, from superpowers like the United States to smaller nations like Latvia or Montenegro. Russia strikes, testing that commitment. As Russia expands its missile strikes toward NATO's doorstep, especially near Poland and Romania, observers recognize the geographical boundary between war and NATO is blurring. Russia appears to be probing NATO's resolve. Will the alliance defend its frontline members or only issue condemnations? Reassuring allies, especially those on the front lines. Countries like Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Romania are deeply concerned that they could become sacrificial buffer zones if Russia continues to escalate. Through deploying Patriot, Iris-T, and NASAM systems, increasing multinational troop presence, conducting joint air defense drills, building trust not just through rhetoric. After repeated criticism of the West's slow responses, this time NATO is acting faster and more decisively because if member states begin to feel abandoned, internal cohesion collapses. Unity is not a slogan. It's a matter of lives, trust, and geopolitical survival. The message is clear. Whether large or small, bordering Russia or the Atlantic, no NATO member stands alone. Section conclusion. The call to increase air defense by 400% is a bold strategic statement from NATO. We do not seek war, but we will not let war reach our doorstep. If Moscow was testing Western unity, this is the answer. Four, consequences and risk of escalation. Growing risk of direct Russia-NATO confrontation. Russia's missile strike on a western Ukrainian airbase just dozens of kilometers from the Polish border crossed an unspoken strategic threshold, the buffer zone near NATO territory. Now, it would take only a single misstep. A missile accidentally veering into NATO territory. A drone crash landing across the border in Poland, Slovakia, or Romania. A facility housing NATO personnel being hit. For Article 5 to potentially move from theory into action. An expanding war zone, Ukraine forced into multi-front defense. What was once a concentrated front line in Donbass and Kharkiv has become a nationwide battlefield. Ukraine now must defend. The Eastern Front, where Russia continues pushing. The Western Rear, where air bases and supply lines are under threat. This leads to thinly spread air defenses, already in short supply, weakened frontline capacity, opening vulnerabilities, rising civilian fear, even in areas once considered safe zones. The result, nowhere in Ukraine is truly safe militarily or psychologically. Western military aid at risk of disruption. One of Russia's key objectives is to cripple Ukraine's supply chain. If drone attacks continue targeting transit depots, logistics hubs are under constant threat, Western contractors grow fearful of transporting arms, then military aid may become delayed, insufficient, or halted entirely just as Ukraine urgently needs air defense and artillery. Domino effect, drawing in other strategic regions. This escalation could trigger broader regional instability. Moldova and Transnistria may become flashpoints through hybrid warfare or provoked unrest. The Black Sea and surrounding maritime routes may heat up with increased Russian and NATO naval presence. The Baltic states are on high alert, fearing spillover threats from the north. The war risks expanding not only geographically, but psychologically across all of Eastern Europe. Strategic miscalculation, accidental escalation. Both Russia and NATO are walking a tightrope, but history teaches us. Major wars don't always start with intention, but often by accident. A single misjudged strike, an overreaction, or a poor decision at the wrong moment could turn tension into catastrophe. With this calculated strike, Russia has disrupted the fragile balance. The question is no longer will the war reach NATO? It is, are we prepared enough to stop it before it's too late? 5. Ukraine faces a survival challenge. Two fronts, one nation under maximum strain. Following the strike on its western airbase, Ukraine now faces two simultaneous battlefronts. In the east, Russian forces continue pressing hard in Donetsk, Kharkiv, and surrounding regions. In the west, once considered a secure rear zone, Ukraine now faces missile and drone attacks. For the first time since the war began, Ukraine has no rear to regroup, resupply, or rest the entire territory is under threat. Overloaded air defense, critical gaps emerging. Ukraine has lost many S-300, Buk, and radar systems over the course of 2 years. Despite Western aid, the current situation is alarming. Interceptor missiles are in chronic short supply, far below the rate of incoming Russian attacks. Air defense systems must now cover both east and west, weakening protection across the board. Major cities like Kyiv, Lviv, and Dnipro are under constant alert but not fully shielded. Without a new wave of military aid, Ukraine risks total vulnerability to air attacks. National morale is strong, but faith in the West wavers. Ukrainian civilians continue to show remarkable resilience. However, the question, when will this end, is being replaced by, will the West abandon us? Promised aid often arrives late, or in smaller quantities than expected. Russia's bold strike deep into western Ukraine without a hard NATO response has caused growing unease, especially in the West. Trust isn't maintained through promises, it's earned through action. President Zelensky, between foreign pressure and domestic strain, President Zelensky is under enormous pressure, pleading for faster and stronger support, especially air defense systems and fighter jets. Maintaining national unity, avoiding morale collapse among civilians and troops. Confronting emerging political opposition, questioning the sustainability of Ukraine's current war strategy. He is tasked with doing the near impossible, keeping a country standing while its logistics and external support systems are visibly slowing down. Ukraine is no longer just fighting for territory, it is fighting for its political survival, military endurance, and national faith. In a long and expanding war, victory doesn't go to the strongest, but to the most resilient, and the best supported at the right moment. Six. Conclusion, a critical moment in the war. The war has entered an irreversible phase. With Russia's missile strike deep into western Ukraine, the war has officially expanded beyond the Eastern Front. This has eliminated the notion of safe zones, pushing Ukraine and all of Europe into a new era, a war with no strategic depth, no secure rear. This is no longer a local conflict. It is a global test of willpower, determination, and international unity. NATO faces a historic dilemma. The world's most powerful military alliance is now caught in a strategic bind. Respond too forcefully and risk direct confrontation with Russia. Respond too weakly and lose credibility, leaving Ukraine isolated. The call for a 400% increase in air defense is a strong signal, but concrete action and deterrence remain lacking. NATO is no longer just defending territory. It is defending the ideal of a rules-based world order. Ukraine, the key to European stability. If Ukraine falls, trust in Western protection will erode in every country bordering Russia. Russia will have created a precedent for expanding war without effective deterrence. Instability could spread to Moldova, Georgia, and the Balkans. Conversely, if Ukraine holds and fights back, Russia will be checked, at least in the short term. Europe's security framework will be reinforced. The international community will learn a crucial lesson. Targeted, timely support can alter the course of war. The unanswered question: who will shape what comes next? Russia seeks to impose rules through missiles and fear. Ukraine strives to win with weapons, and unwavering resilience. NATO and the West must decide, are they spectators or architects of the outcome? We are standing at a crossroads. Either the world enters an age of deterrence and unity, or slides into a prolonged era of instability and drawn-out proxy wars. Final reflection. June 2025 may be remembered not for a major battle, but because it was the moment the world looked at itself and had to decide what to do next. The world situation is very tense, right? Leave a comment to let me know what topic you want to know next.